I was standing in the back of a crowded bookstore in Seattle when I heard my father's voice. Not literally. My father had been dead for 12 years. But the words coming out of the best-selling author's mouth, the cadence, the stories, the soul of every sentence, they were my father's, word for word. And that's when I knew someone had stolen his life. Have you ever found something that belonged to someone you lost? A letter, a photo, something that brought them back for just a moment? Drop a comment below and tell me what it was. My name is Eloise Norman. I'm 34 years old, and I work as a high school English teacher in Tacoma, Washington. I live a quiet life. I grade papers, I drink too much coffee, I visit my mother every Sunday. I'm not the kind of person who makes scenes or confronts celebrities, but that night in October, I did something I never thought I'd do. I walked up to one of the most acclaimed authors in America and said 5 words that made him go pale. It was October 14th, 2023. A Saturday evening, the kind where Seattle's autumn rain had finally stopped and left the city smelling like wet pavement and fallen leaves. I wasn't planning to go to the book signing at all. I'd been planning to do what I did every Saturday night, grade essays in my small apartment in Tacoma, drink cheap red wine, listen to the couple upstairs argue through the thin walls, maybe watch something mindless on Netflix until I fell asleep on the couch. But my friend Jessica had other plans. She'd shown up at my door at 5 p.m. with 2 tickets and a determined look that I knew from 15 years of friendship meant resistance was futile. "Come on, Eloise," she'd said, pushing past me into my apartment. "Nicholas Reese is huge right now. Everyone's reading A Life Rebuilt. It's supposed to be this incredible memoir about growing up poor in rural America, overcoming adversity, finding yourself through hard work and honest reflection. You teach English. You'll love it. Plus, you need to get out more. You can't spend every weekend alone with Kafka and a stack of papers covered in red ink." Kafka, my black cat, had meowed in protest from his perch on the bookshelf as if defending my lifestyle choices. I'd heard of Nicholas Reese. Everyone had. His memoir had been on the New York Times bestseller list for 43 weeks straight. Oprah had picked it for her book club back in March. He'd been on The Daily Show, Fresh Air, The Tonight Show. Time magazine had featured him in their Voices That Matter issue. Critics called him the voice of working-class America, a modern-day Steinbeck, and the writer America needs right now. The book's success story was everywhere. How Nicholas had struggled for years, worked construction jobs while writing at night, sent his manuscript to 70 agents before Alice Hammond at Hammond Literary took a chance on him. How the book had sold for $3 million in a bidding war. How it had struck a chord with readers who felt forgotten by the literary establishment. The mechanics, the factory workers, the people whose stories never made it into MFA workshops or prestigious literary journals. I hadn't read the book. Looking back, I'm not sure why. Maybe because I was tired of memoirs by people who'd overcome poverty and then made millions writing about it, as if success was the only validation that made a working-class life worth documenting. Maybe because I was genuinely busy. Teaching 11th grade English at Franklin Pierce High School meant drowning in essays, lesson plans, and administrative nonsense. Maybe because some part of me, some quiet, intuitive part I didn't understand then, was avoiding it. But Jessica had already bought 2 tickets to the reading and signing at Elliott Bay Book Company, one of Seattle's most beloved independent bookstores. So I went. The place was packed. 200 people, maybe more, crammed into the reading space on the second floor. Nicholas Reese sat at the front in a leather armchair, looking exactly like his author photo. Mid-40s, salt and pepper hair, wire-rimmed glasses, the kind of casually expensive clothes that whisper "successful writer" without shouting it. Handsome in an approachable NPR interview kind of way. I don't know why, but he looked familiar. I had a feeling I'd met him before. His literary agent sat beside him, a sharp-looking woman in her 50s with perfectly styled gray hair and a black blazer that probably cost more than my monthly rent. The store owner introduced her as Alice Hammond from Hammond Literary Agency in New York. Nicholas began reading from chapter 3 of his book, the chapter about his childhood summers helping his grandfather fix cars in a garage in rural Oregon, about the smell of motor oil and cut grass, about learning that honest work with your hands was as valuable as any college degree. I was only half listening at first, thinking about the essays I still needed to grade, wondering if I'd fed my cat before leaving. Normal, boring Saturday thoughts. Then he read this line. My grandfather used to say that every engine tells a story if you listen close enough. The rattle tells you what's broken. The purr tells you what's right. And if you're patient, if you really pay attention, you can hear the whole history of a machine in the way it breathes. My blood went cold. I knew that line. I knew it because I'd read it 100 times. In my father's handwriting. In the diary he kept. My father, Thomas Norman, had been a mechanic. Worked at Benson's Auto Repair in Tacoma for 37 years. He'd never published anything, never tried to, but he wrote every single day in composition notebooks. The cheap kind with the marbled black and white covers that you can buy at any drugstore for $2. He wrote about his day, his thoughts, his observations about people and life and work. Beautiful, simple, honest prose that no one ever read except our family. He died of a heart attack in 2011 at the age of 64, and we'd kept his diaries in boxes in my mother's attic. Except one was missing. It had disappeared after his death, and we'd never figured out where it went. Until now. Nicholas Reese kept reading. Another paragraph. Another page. Every single word was my father's. Not similar. Not inspired by. Identical. Jessica, I whispered. My voice sounded strange. I need to leave. What? We just got here. I need to leave. Now. I pushed through the crowd, stumbled down the stairs, out onto the street. The Seattle rain was starting. That fine mist that isn't quite rain but soaks you anyway. I stood there on the sidewalk, shaking, while people walked past with umbrellas and shopping bags. My phone was in my hand before I consciously decided to use it. I pulled up Amazon, bought the Kindle version of A Life Rebuilt by Nicholas Reese, started reading right there on the street. Chapter 1, Chapter 2, Chapter 3. Every word, every single word was my father's. Nicholas had changed dates, some names and locations. But the voice, the phrasing, the soul of the writing was my father's. Whole paragraphs lifted directly from the diary I'd read so many times I practically had it memorized. I felt sick, violated, like someone had broken into my father's grave and stolen pieces of him. Jessica found me 20 minutes later, still standing in the rain. Eloise, what the hell? You just ran out. She stopped, looked at my face. What's wrong? That book, I said. That memoir. It's not his, it's my father's. He stole my father's diary. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. I stayed up reading the entire book on my Kindle, making notes in a document on my laptop, cross-referencing everything I could remember from Dad's diary. By 5 a.m., my eyes were burning. The chapter about learning to fix a transmission? That was Dad's story about teaching my Uncle Mike how to rebuild an engine in the summer of 1985. The summer it was so hot that the garage thermometer hit 107 degrees, and Dad said working under a car felt like being inside an oven. The section about the pride of working with your hands, about how society looked down on blue-collar workers but they were the ones who kept the world running? Dad wrote that exact paragraph after a customer, a college professor, had made a condescending comment about people who work with their hands instead of their minds. Nicholas Reese had taken my father's life, my father's words, my father's soul, and put his own name on it. At 7 a.m., I called my sister Eliza. She was living in Portland now, married to a software engineer named Garrett. 2 kids, Lola, 8, and George, 5. She worked as a dental hygienist, drove a minivan, lived in a nice house in the suburbs. We talked maybe once a month, mostly about Mom, occasionally about her kids. We'd never been particularly close. 6 years apart, she was 40, I was 34, and we'd taken different paths after Dad died. She'd thrown herself into building a normal life. I'd taught English and lived alone with a cat. "Eloise, it's 7 in the morning on a Sunday, are you okay?" Her voice was groggy with sleep. I heard Garrett mumble something in the background. "Do you remember Nicholas?" I asked. No preamble, no small talk. Silence. Long enough that I thought maybe she'd hung up. Then, "Nicholas? My ex Nicholas?" "Yes." "Why are you asking about him?" "That was 12 years ago, Eloise. We dated for like 3 months. It was nothing serious." "Why? What was his last name?" Another pause. "Reese, Nicholas Reese. Why are you asking me about a guy I dated over a decade ago?" My stomach dropped even though I'd already known. I'd already guessed. I'd Googled him at 3 a.m., found photos from his book tour, and now looking closer, I recognized the face even though he'd aged, filled out, grown more polished. Eliza. He's a famous author now. He wrote a best-selling memoir called A Life Rebuilt. And I know, he stole it from Dad's diary. More silence. I could hear her breathing. "What?" I explained everything. The book signing. The words I recognized. The passages that were Dad's, not Nicholas's. The voice. The stories. The soul of the writing that was unmistakably our father's. "Oh my God." Her voice had changed, gone small and horrified. "Oh my God, Eloise. When we broke up, it was November 2011, maybe early December. I couldn't find that diary. The one from the 80s and 90s, I'd been keeping it in a box in my apartment. I was going through it after Dad died, reading his words, trying to feel close to him. I had it on my coffee table for weeks. Nicholas was over all the time. We were dating. He was there 3 or 4 times a week." She paused. I could hear her starting to cry. "After we broke up, the diary was gone. I looked everywhere, tore apart my apartment. I thought I'd misplaced it in the move. I'd just moved into a new place that October. Or maybe I'd left it at Mom's. I asked Nicholas if he'd seen it. He said no, said he didn't even remember seeing a diary. I figured I'd lost it somehow. I felt so guilty, Eloise. That was Dad's writing, his words, and I lost it." "You didn't lose it," I said quietly. "He stole it." "Oh, God!" She was openly crying now. "I remember. He was always interested when I talked about Dad. Asked questions about his life, his work, what kind of person he was. I thought he was just being supportive, trying to help me process my grief. But he was researching. Wasn't he? He was mining my stories for material. Probably. I'm so sorry." Her voice broke. "This is my fault. I brought him into our lives. I gave him access to Dad's diary. Eliza, stop. This isn't your fault. You didn't know. You were grieving. You trusted someone who seemed kind. That's not a crime. But Dad's diary—" "We're going to get it back," I said. "I don't know how yet, but we are. I need you to tell me everything you remember about Nicholas. Everything." She took a shaky breath, started talking, told me how they met, at a poetry reading in Portland, October 2011, a month after Dad died. Nicholas had been in the audience, come up to her afterward, said something about how her father sounded like an interesting man based on what she'd shared during the open mic. They'd gone for coffee, started dating. He was charming, attentive, said all the right things. "He told me he was a writer," Eliza said, "working on a novel. He worked construction during the day, wrote at night. He showed me some of his stuff. It was okay, not great, kind of generic. He asked about Dad constantly. What was he like? What did he do? What stories did he tell? I thought he was interested in my family, interested in me. When did you break up? Early December. He got weird, distant, started canceling plans, then he just ended it. Said he needed to focus on his writing, couldn't be in a relationship. I was hurt but not devastated. It had only been 3 months. And honestly, I was too buried in grief about Dad to care that much about a guy. And the diary was gone by then? Must have been. I didn't notice immediately. But by Christmas, when I wanted to read it again, it was gone. Did he ever come back? Ask about anything? No, I never saw him again. Never heard from him. Until I guess now, when he's on TV and winning awards for Dad's stolen words. She started crying harder. I waited. Let her process. Finally, she said, "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet, but I'm not letting him get away with this. I'll help however I can. I'll testify. I'll tell everyone that I dated him, that the diary disappeared. Whatever you need." "Thank you." "Eloise?" "Yeah?" "Dad would be proud of you. For fighting for him." I had to close my eyes against the tears. I hope so. Sunday, I drove to my mother's house. She still lived in the same small ranch-style home in Tacoma where I'd grown up, the house my father had bought in 1985 with his first big bonus from the repair shop. 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a garage that Dad had converted into a workshop where he fixed things for neighbors on weekends. The mortgage had been paid off for 15 years. Mom lived there alone now, surrounded by 40 years of memories. I let myself in with my key. She was in the kitchen making coffee when I came in, wearing her bathrobe and the fuzzy slippers I'd bought her last Christmas. "Eloise? I didn't know you were coming by today. Is everything okay?" She looked at my face, and her expression changed. "What's wrong?" "Mom, I need Dad's diaries, all of them." She didn't ask why, didn't hesitate. Just set down her coffee mug and said, "They're in the attic. I'll help you." We climbed the pull-down ladder to the attic together. Even though I told her I could do it myself, she should stay down. But Mom was stubborn. At 73, she still insisted she was perfectly capable of climbing ladders and carrying boxes. Thank you very much. The attic was hot and dusty, filled with the accumulated debris of a lifetime. Christmas decorations, old clothes, boxes of photos, furniture that was too good to throw away but not good enough to keep using. In the back corner, under a plastic tarp, were 3 cardboard boxes labeled in my father's handwriting. Tom's Notebooks, 1972-2011. We carried them down one at a time, set them on the kitchen table. Mom made us both coffee while I opened the first box. Dad's notebooks were organized by year, each one labeled in his neat block handwriting on the front cover. 1972, 1978, 1978, 1985, 1985, 1989. Then a gap, the missing 1989-1995 diary. Then 1995, 2001, 2001, 2007, 2007, 2011. I opened the 1995-2001 diary carefully. The binding was loose, pages yellowed with age. Dad's handwriting filled every page, no margins, no wasted space. He wrote small to fit more words, paragraphs flowing into each other like thoughts that couldn't be contained. I read a random entry from October 1996. Fixed Mrs. Jefferson's Honda today. She cried when I told her it would only cost $200. Said her husband had died last month and she was worried she couldn't afford to keep the car. I didn't have the heart to tell her the parts alone cost $180. Sometimes you do work for reasons that have nothing to do with money. That was Dad. Every page was Dad. His voice, his heart, his way of seeing the world. "What's this about?" Mom asked quietly. She'd been watching me read, her coffee untouched. I told her. Everything. The book signing, the words I recognized, Nicholas Reese, Eliza's stolen diary. By the time I finished, Mom's hand was over her mouth and tears were streaming down her face. "That bastard," she whispered. My mother had never sworn. Not once in my entire life. Not when the washing machine flooded the basement. Not when Dad died. Not ever. Your father poured his heart into those notebooks. I know. He wanted to be a writer when he was young. Did you know that? She wasn't really asking me. More like talking to herself, or to Dad's ghost. Before we got married, before kids, before the shop, he wanted to write books. He'd talk about it when we were dating, stories he wanted to tell, ideas for novels. But life gets in the way. Bills come due. Babies arrive. The garage job that was supposed to be temporary becomes 37 years. She picked up the 1995-2001 diary, held it like it was made of glass. But he never stopped writing. Every single night after work, after dinner, after the news, he'd sit at the kitchen table with one of these notebooks and write. I'd ask him what he was writing about. He'd say, "Just thoughts, honey. Just trying to make sense of the day." She looked at me directly. He gave up his dream of being a published writer. But he never gave up writing. These notebooks were his dream, compressed down to something that fit into a working man's life. And someone stole that. Someone stole your father's voice and put their name on it. I'm going to fix this, Mom. How? I don't know yet, but I will. She stood up, walked over to where I was sitting, put both hands on my shoulders and looked me in the eye. Your father would be proud of you, for fighting for him. He always said you had his stubbornness, said you'd make a great teacher because you never gave up on anyone. I had to close my eyes against the tears. I miss him so much, I whispered. I know, baby. Me too. Every single day. We spent the next hour going through the diaries together. Mom would read passages out loud, laughing or crying depending on the memory. Here was the entry about when I was born. Here was the day Eliza graduated high school. Here was Dad's reaction to 9/11, to the financial crisis, to getting older and watching his body slow down. Every page was a piece of him. His observations about customers, his thoughts about politics and society, his fears about money, his pride in his work, his love for his family that came through in every word even when he wasn't writing about us directly. These should have been published, Mom said. Your father was a beautiful writer. They will be, I promised. I'm going to make sure they are. Monday morning, I called in sick to work. Spent the entire day going through Dad's other diaries, making notes, taking photos, building a case. I found dozens of passages that used the same language, same metaphors, same storytelling voice as Nicholas's memoir. References to the same people. Dad's coworker Jerry became Jeremy in the book. His friend Phil became Philip. The garage in Tacoma became a garage in Eugene, Oregon. But the stories were identical. By Monday evening, I had an airtight case. 47 direct passages, 23 character matches, 16 story parallels, photos of every page, dates on every diary entry, all from before Nicholas ever published anything. Tuesday, I found out Nicholas Reese was doing another signing, same bookstore, Thursday night, a special extended engagement due to popular demand. I bought a ticket. Thursday night, I walked into Elliott Bay Book Company with a canvas bag over my shoulder. Inside, 3 of my father's diaries, my phone full of photos and notes. The crowd was even bigger than Saturday. Nicholas read from chapter 7 this time, the chapter about his grandfather's death and the legacy of hard work he left behind. It was my father's story about his own father's death in 1989. Word for word. I stood in the back, waiting. When the reading ended and Nicholas opened the floor for questions, I raised my hand. He pointed at me, smiled. Yes? In the back? I stepped forward so everyone could see me. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. Mr. Reese, I have a question about your memoir. Of course. How much of it is actually yours? The smile faltered. I'm sorry? These words you just read, about your grandfather's death, they're not your words. They're my father's. This is my father's diary from 1989. Thomas Norman. He was a mechanic in Tacoma, Washington. He died in 2011. You dated my sister Eliza that same year, and when you broke up, this diary disappeared. The room went silent. 200 people staring. Nicholas's face had gone pale. I don't know what you're talking about. I looked up. That's my father's writing. That's plagiarism, Mr. Reese. You stole my father's diary. You changed some names and locations. And you published his life story as your own. Nicholas stood up. This is absurd. I don't even know your sister. This is harassment. I'm calling Security. Her name is Eliza Norman. You dated her from August to October 2011. She lived in Tacoma. You broke up right before you suddenly found your voice and wrote this memoir. Alice Hammond, his agent, stepped forward. Cool, professional, in control. Ma'am, these are serious accusations. You need to leave. I have proof, I said. I reached into my bag, pulled out the other diaries. 6 more diaries, same narrator voice, same themes. All dated before your client published anything. I have photos. I have witnesses. I have my father's obituary from 2011. I can prove every word. Alice's expression didn't change, but I saw something flicker in her eyes. Doubt. Maybe fear. We're going to call the police if you don't leave, she said quietly. Go ahead, I said. Call them. I'd love to explain to the police how Nicholas Reese built his entire career on a dead man's stolen diary. Security did escort me out. But not before half the audience had filmed the confrontation on their phones. By the time I got home, the video was already spreading on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram. Woman accuses best-selling author of plagiarism was trending. My phone started ringing at midnight. Journalists, bloggers, people wanting my story. I didn't answer. I was too tired, too angry, too scared I'd made a terrible mistake by confronting him publicly. But Friday morning, something unexpected happened. Alice Hammond called me. Ms. Norman, this is Alice Hammond. We need to talk. I have nothing to say to you, I said. Please, just hear me out. I'm not calling to threaten you or intimidate you. I'm calling because... She paused. Because I think you might be telling the truth. And if you are, I need to know. Why would you help me? You're his agent. Because I represent writers, Ms. Norman. Real writers. People who pour their souls onto pages. If Nicholas Reese stole someone else's work, if he's been lying to me, to his publisher, to the world, I can't be part of that. My reputation, my agency's reputation, is built on integrity. She paused again. I could hear the strain in her voice. I've been doing this job for 27 years, and I know when something doesn't add up. So I'm asking you, can you prove it? Yes, I said. I can prove everything. Then I need you to come to my hotel, bring the diaries, bring your evidence, and let me see it. I met Alice Hammond at the Four Seasons Hotel in downtown Seattle at 2 p.m. She'd booked a conference room. When I walked in, she was sitting at a long table with her laptop, a legal pad, and a copy of Nicholas's book. She didn't smile, didn't make small talk, just said, "Show me." I laid out the diaries on the table, opened them to marked pages, showed her my father's writing next to Nicholas's published words. She read in silence for 20 minutes, checked dates, cross-referenced passages, made notes. Finally, she closed the last diary, took off her reading glasses, rubbed her eyes. "This is a nightmare," she said quietly. "An absolute nightmare. I've represented Nicholas for 4 years. I sold this book for $3 million. It's been translated into 29 languages. There's a movie deal. There's a sequel in the works." She looked at me directly. "And every single word of it is your father's. Not inspired by, not influenced by, stolen." I felt a wave of relief so powerful I almost started crying. "You believe me." How could I not? The evidence is overwhelming. The handwriting is there. The voice is identical. She shook her head. I've been in this industry long enough to know when something's wrong. I should have known sooner. Nicholas's first draft was too polished, too formed. Most first-time memoirists struggle for years to find their voice. He had it immediately. I thought he was a natural talent. He's a thief, I said. Yes, he is. Alice met my eyes. Ms. Norman, Eloise, I want to help you, not for altruism. I'll be honest about that. If this comes out the way it's going to come out, my agency will be caught in the blast radius. Representing a plagiarist destroys careers. But more than that. She paused, seemed to choose her words carefully. More than that, your father deserves credit for his words. He deserves recognition. And I can help make that happen. How? I'm going to contact the publisher. I'm going to tell them everything. I'm going to present your evidence. And I'm going to recommend they pull the book immediately, issue a public apology, and republish it under your father's name posthumously. What about Nicholas? He'll be sued, probably criminally charged with fraud. He'll lose everything, his reputation, his career, his money, as he should. She looked at the diaries on the table. Your father was a beautiful writer, Eloise. These entries. They're raw and honest and true. He deserved to be published under his own name. He never wanted to be famous, I said quietly. He just wanted to write, to process his life through words. Then we'll honor that. We'll tell his story, the real story. A working-class man who wrote in composition notebooks every night after work, who poured his soul onto pages no one ever read, until someone stole them, and until his daughter fought back. Alice called me back 36 hours later. I was at my apartment pacing, drinking my 5th cup of coffee, checking my phone every 30 seconds. I found it, she said without preamble. My heart stopped. What? The diary, the original. I found it. How? Where? Nicholas has an office in his apartment in Capitol Hill. When I represented him, I had a key for emergencies. He travels a lot for book tours, sometimes needs me to pick up contracts or manuscripts. After our conversation, I called his publisher, explained the situation, got legal clearance to access his office to investigate potential fraud. I brought the publisher's lawyer with me as a witness. She paused. I could hear papers rustling. We found it in his desk, bottom drawer under a stack of old manuscripts, a composition notebook with a marbled black and white cover. Inside the front cover, written in pen, Thomas Norman, 1989-1995. I couldn't breathe, couldn't speak. Eloise, are you there? Yes, I whispered. I'm here. The handwriting matches the other diaries you showed me. The dates match. The content matches the book almost word for word. He kept the original. I don't know if he's arrogant or stupid or sentimental, but he kept it. We have him. What happens now? Now I need you to come to my hotel. Bring the other diaries. Bring your evidence. And we're going to end Nicholas Reese's career. It took 6 weeks. 6 weeks of legal meetings, publisher negotiations, media interviews, and watching Nicholas Reese's world crumble in real time. He denied everything at first. Claimed he'd never met my sister, never been to Tacoma, never seen my father's diaries. But Eliza came forward with photos of them together from 2011. Neighbors remembered him visiting her apartment. Phone records confirmed their relationship, and the original diary proved it beyond a shadow of a doubt. His publisher pulled A Life Rebuilt from shelves, refunded hundreds of thousands of purchases, terminated his contract. Alice Hammond dropped him as a client. The movie deal evaporated. The foreign translations were canceled. The literary prizes he'd won were revoked. And in January 2024, the book was republished under a new title, with a new cover and a new author name. A Mechanic's Life, The Journals of Thomas Norman. The cover featured a photo of my dad from 1989, 42 years old, in his work uniform, smiling in front of the auto repair. Inside, I'd written a foreword explaining everything. Who my father was. How he'd never published a word but had written every day for 40 years. How Nicholas Reese had stolen his diary, and his voice and his life. How I'd fought to get it back. The book sold 60,000 copies in the first month. It got reviewed in the New York Times, the Washington Post, NPR. Critics called it achingly honest and a working-class masterpiece. My father, the mechanic who wrote in cheap notebooks, became a posthumously celebrated author. I used the settlement money, $3 million from Nicholas Reese and the publisher, to establish the Thomas Norman Foundation. It provides grants to working-class writers who can't afford workshops or MFA programs. People like my dad who write because they have to, not because they want to be famous. Nicholas Reese disappeared from public life. Last I heard, he was working at a hardware store in Montana under a different name. Fitting somehow. The man who stole a life story ended up with no story of his own. Alice Hammond sent me a letter 6 months after everything settled. Said representing my father's book posthumously was the proudest moment of her career, that his writing reminded her why she got into publishing in the first place, to champion authentic voices. My mother keeps a copy of the republished book on her coffee table. Sometimes I catch her reading passages, crying softly, running her fingers over my father's words as if she can touch him again through the ink. And me? I still teach English at the same high school, still grade too many papers, still drink too much coffee. But now, when I teach my students about plagiarism, about intellectual property, about the importance of authentic voice, I tell them this story. I tell them about my father, about his diaries, about the thief who tried to steal his words, and about how I stood up in a crowded bookstore and said, "Sir, you're reading my father's diary." Because some things are worth fighting for. Truth, justice, legacy, and the words of a man who wrote in composition notebooks every night after fixing cars, who never published a single thing, who died thinking no one would ever read what he'd written. His words matter. His voice matters. And I made sure the world finally heard it. What would you have done in Eloise's position? Would you have confronted him publicly, or gone straight to the lawyers? Let me know in the comments below. And if this story moved you, if you believe in standing up for what's right, please subscribe. Because the best stories aren't always in best-selling books. Sometimes they're in cheap notebooks written by people who never expected anyone to read them.